And you know, it's always been my position, right, that the right wing, I was going to say the white, but the white wing too, the white and the right wing are really, really on these PR campaigns to really inject transphobia, transphobia in particular, into the black community, especially into black women, right? Especially into black women, because they know that last election, black women decided that election, right? And they're realizing the power of the black female vote. You know, this is why they put out this propaganda that they're trying to replace you. How can women be replaced? It's the most asinine argument, excuse me. It's the most asinine argument. But it's so easy to get people to buy into hate speech when people are already ready to be hateful, right? I personally hate the word queer. But you understand? See, you guys are talking about cis, right? I don't like the word queer. Girl, get in here. Get in here right now because you have to hear this. So for the last, at this point it's been about a month, right? But the last month, this whole Jess Hilarious thing and her commentary in response to a trans woman coming out and saying that cis-het women are not the gatekeepers of period went viral, right? It was all over the place. And one of the main questions I had since I heard this, like, what was the impetus? Like, why would you say that? Like, what was the motivation? Because I just needed context. And so now we have context. And the context is coming directly from the horse's mouth, okay? So let's take a look.
Trans woman made saying that essentially cis women don't own a womanhood and they don't own periods was a 2-year-old video made in response to a cis woman being violently transphobic towards a trans man.
You don't even know the context. That video was me responding to a cis woman being transphobic to a trans man, which is why I said you don't own period, you don't own womanhood. A Republican went on my page, because the video is 2 years old, went on my page, clipped it, and had that quick little moment, put it on Twitter, and went viral, and it had like 5 million views in one day. And that's how the drama started. And then someone clipped it and put it on Instagram, and that's how Jess got involved.
Anybody who's on...
So there it is. You heard it. You heard it, right? And I think that is so essential to this conversation, right? So this clip that has all of you in an uproar, that has all of you, girl, fighting tooth and nail to hold on to your menstrual cycles, this clip, a Republican, right? This clip, right-wing media is once again gaslighting and propagating hate speech, and you guys are buying right into the narrative, right? Without even taking the time to do your due diligence. Because see, doing research is not important when you're already rooted in hate, when you're already rooted in bigotry, when you're already rooted in discrimination, when you're already rooted in transphobia. Who needs to do the research? Right? Now listen, if you've been following this conversation the way I've been following this conversation, then you will know that a lot of the responses that we've seen have talked about colonialism and patriarchy and how those systems essentially cause minorities to infight, right? And so that we don't look at the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is, you're down here, right, fighting with trans women saying that we think we're better than you, right? But guess who's being better than you? White, cis, het, normative men, the ones who create legislation, the ones who create laws that continue to oppress you. It ain't us. It's not us, the ones who take away your bodily autonomy. That's who thinks that they're better than you. And when you allow them to manipulate you by putting out this sort of propaganda and not giving you context and not being intelligent enough to ask the questions about what was the motivation, what was the impetus, where did this come from, without caring about those things, then you're essentially doing their dirty work. They know that black women pushed that election over last election cycle, and they're wanting to make sure that they do everything possible to swing that pendulum in the opposite direction. And if you are not smart enough, you will help to vote against your own interests. So here we are, hearing this young lady say in her own voice that this video happened 2 years ago, not one, but two. 2 years ago, and it happened in defense of a trans man who was essentially being attacked by a cis woman. Now, that cis woman who sparked this conversation, who sparked this debate by being transphobic, she gets to escape scot-free. No one's going to hold her feet to the fire and say, why did you say that? What you said wasn't cool. What you said wasn't okay. Because the humanity of trans people is just really not important. People don't care. They don't care. And we keep talking about this intersectionality between black and queer, right? I personally hate the word queer. But you understand? See, you guys are talking about cis, right? I don't like the word queer. You know, don't call me queer. I'm not queer. But, I mean, I guess. So anyway, but I'm just just know that I'm not a fan of the term queer. It's just, I don't know. When I think queer, I think weird. I think, you know, I guess I don't like the word queer. So anyway, I digress. So here we are having this conversation about intersectionality, as I was saying before, about black, and LGBTQIP plus, where people who are black don't like the comparison, right, between the plight, because, and the reason that they don't like the plight is because you are being bigoted, but you feel entitled to that bigotry because you don't believe that LGBTQIAP plus people were born who they are. And it's so amazing to me, right? Because if you talk to a black woman and a white woman came to her and she says, why are black women so aggressive? This is why black men date white women, because you guys don't know how to treat a man. Black women are just they have too much of an attitude. You would look at her like, bitch, have you lost your entire mind, right? How are you as a white woman going to come and tell me what it is, not just to be a black woman, but what it is to keep a black man? Girl, if you don't go somewhere and sit down, Karen, this is what that's the energy that we're going to have for that, right? But it's just amazing to me that as a trans woman, because I'm going to take the black out of it just for purposes of this conversation, as a trans woman, everybody and their mama can tell me about what it means to be trans, about what I felt, about what I've gone through. And this is the danger of people listening to people like Dr. Umar and the video on TikTok where the woman talks about the intersectionality, about not knowing whether you were born queer because you don't know if you were born black. And these are just all, and to some degree, I guess she's right, because even blackness is a social construct. Definitely as it relates to the black experience. Because I wasn't born black. The one thing that I was born was me. Okay, I was born me. And you were born you. Okay, so let's not make this any complicated than it needs to be. And if I'm telling you how how I was born, why is it that you have such a hard time with hearing what I have to say? And again, back to the Dr. Umar point, the very first thing, because he's a quote-unquote doctor, when I go to the doctor, if I have some sort of ailment, the very first thing that the doctor asks me, he says to me, tell me what you feel. Tell me where it hurts. Does this hurt? Does that hurt? Because at the end of the day, I'm me. And the doctor can help to diagnose the problem, but he's not feeling what I'm feeling. Okay? So Dr. Umar can never tell me about what it is to be a black trans woman. I can certainly tell him because he hasn't lived my experience. According to most of you, because I'm trans, I've definitely lived the experience of a black man. But tell me, when has he lived the experience of a black trans woman? He hasn't. And until he does, his positions, his beliefs, this old medical journal that he's quoting from like 1970s, what have you, where he talks about, transgenderism essentially being diagnosed as a mental health issue. I'm sorry, I'm just getting a message. And people hold on to that information that he puts out there as if it's gospel. And let me tell you something. Even in contemporary history, right? Let's take it back to COVID when that first hit. At one point, we were told not to wear masks. Masks wouldn't offer any defense. And so people weren't wearing them. Then we were told to wear masks. And then, you know what I'm saying? And then we were told you should get a vaccine. You shouldn't get a vaccine. There was all of this information coming out from the medical community because you know what? They were figuring it the fuck out. And as their awareness and their understanding grew, their approach towards COVID changed. Now, how come that can't be true about their understanding of what it means to be transgender? Yeah, they probably thought it was crazy at one point in time because they were ignorant. And the definition of ignorant is lacking education. But when you start to educate yourself, when you want the education, because see, that's what's most important here. Because the thing that we have, the problem that I have about this whole Jess Hilarious issue is that no one ever took the time to figure out what the impetus was for this girl to say what she said. It didn't matter.